So the rivers that I'm on are very rocky, and the steelhead come in the fall, and they have nothing better to do than to feed through the winter months. So one of the primary bait fish among all those rocks is a sculpin, and so I tie this sculpin pattern that I use all the way through the winter months anytime I'm fishing around rocks. And it's pretty easy pattern to fish. You just get it near the bottom. Sometimes you put a little tiny shot in front of it just to get it to nick the bottom, and you cast it out and you let it nick the bottom and swing it just like your typical swung fly at that point. And a steelhead or sometimes a lake run brown will eat this fly, and it's a really good one for me to have in the box. Okay, so I'm going to continue tying this pattern. It's kind of a typical winter sculpin that I use in my area. I call this one a shrew, but you can call it your typical winter sculpin. So I'm going to cover the entire shank here with thread, and I'm going to give it a snip towards the front. And I'm going to again take some bead chain, looks like this. You could also easily use lead eyes on this fly if you had higher water conditions. But for simplicity, we'll just use some bead chain. I'm going to cut it with a pair of diagonal pliers, just like I did with the previous pattern. And it doesn't matter, because of the design of the fly, whether you tie these eyes on top or bottom of the hook. It works great either way. So I've just lashed in these eyes using a figure 8. And I'm going to just cover the hook thread back up here. So this is all we have. We have a pair of eyes on top of the hook, and you can use as many or as few eyes as you want. You can use plastic if you want. Because I want this fly to be pretty close to the bottom, I usually add a little bit of weight to the pattern. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some braided fishing line. You could use beading wire if it was your preference. Typically I use 50-pound braid, and I use this red braid so that when the fly is finished I can tell where the braid is. Otherwise I fiddle around looking for the braid, and that's makes me look dumb to my clients. So so it's important to look good, you know. So anyways, I'm going to take about 6 inches, 8 inches of this material, and I'm going to give it a cut. It's pretty tough stuff. What I'm going to do, because if you just tied in a loop of this braid, you'd have a really hard time getting the, if a big fish bit it, typically because it's a slippery material, he'd just pull this right out of the fly. So what we're going to do to make this much more strong with our tying is we're just going to tie an overhand knot in that loop. We're going to bring it down to the back, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up through the bottom of the eye like so, and I'm going to go out a little ways back behind the fly. I'm going to bind it down. It's really important that this comes down below and that we fold it under, and that way the thread can bite in right in front of that knot, and no fish is going to be able to pull that through at this point. So nothing makes you look more stupid to a client when you get a big tug and your fly comes back without a hook on it. So we want to prevent that. So okay, so this is what we have. The next step, you could use either pine squirrel or rabbit. Pine squirrel is nice because this is a sculpin pattern. We're trying to fish it deep, and pine squirrel sinks really easily. So I'm going to just tie a little bit of pine squirrel on the back. We're going to make it exactly as long as that tag is. Okay, like so. And then we're going to take a little bit of ice stub, and we're going to just dub a little bit onto the thread, and we're going to wind it up just a hair here, and then we're going to give it a little bit of couple feathers on here just to give the fly a little bit of bulk as it gets bigger. Sculpins are really narrow at the tail and they get bigger as you go forward, so we're going to add a little bit of this like so. It's never a bad idea to add a tiny bit more ice stub. And at this point we're going to add a couple different things. We're going to add a little bit of red or cranberry colored flash. Cranberry tends to work better than the regular bright reds in my area. So I'm just going to lay this over like this, fold it over, And we give it one more feather here, like so. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit different material here. About a year ago, the company that makes Flashabou started making this grizzly colored flash, and they made it in a bunch of different colors. The only one that I've been really successful with is this clear colored, and it works really good on sculpins or any of the mottled colored bait fish like gobies and things like that. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, and I'm going to just lay this over the top of the fly, and it'll just give the fly a little bit more of a mottled look in the water. Sculpins have pectoral fins. Actually, they have 2 fins that come off to the side and 2 that come off the bottom. We're just going to throw a couple little side fins onto this fly, and we're just going to do this with a little bit of pine squirrel again. You could also use grizzly marabou or any other type of material like that, and we're going to go like this. Now, I'm going to add one more color of flash to this just because it looks nice and the fish really like this in the winter. This is a braided Flashabou, and it's a mix between blue and green. I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of this to the pattern. It's one of those materials that can definitely overpower the fly, but because this is kind of stringy material, it almost acts like a spay hackle in the water. And you ideally will clip that just a little bit shorter than the other materials, like so. And just a couple more things. I like to use, even though it's not really very natural with the sculpins, it just works well. I use this Kingfisher Blue Ice Dub, and I put a little dot of it right here, like so. I'm not really using it as a dubbing, more of a head making material. Then I'm going to take some regular peacock colored ice dub. It looks like this, and I'm going to take a pretty good bunch of this and tie it in right at the head. And at this point, that's all there's going to be to this fly. Sometimes I put a little bit of rubber leg dubbing at the front. Makes for a nice head, but this one we're going to finish just like this. And that's something that would definitely catch a fish in my neck of the woods, and probably yours too. So, and you can see how the fly looks once it's completed, like so. And like so. And there you go.